Mr. Speaker, sir, let me first of all thank all the honourable members from both sides of the House who have taken the floor and have participated in the debate on what we consider to be two very important bills that I have presented on Wednesday. These bills, Mr. Speaker, sir, are our testimony to our resolve to win the battle against COVID-19 and its consequences, both on the sanitary and the economic fronts. While the COVID-19 Miscellaneous Provisions Bill aims at empowering our economy to weather the storm it is facing, save enterprises and jobs, and build for a recovery over time, the quarantine bill aims at preventing the resurgence of COVID-19 infection and other such pandemics in the future. In view of the deep, broad and long-lasting consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, I would have expected a patriotic and apolitical stance from the opposition. But I must say that I am quite disappointed at the level of the interventions from the opposition side. They are totally out of tune with reality. This was blatantly demonstrated at the beginning of the pandemic, where the Honourable Leader of the Opposition made the inflammatory statement that thousands of Mauritians were infected by the virus. Honourable Mohammed, on his part, at the beginning of the lockdown, posted on his Facebook that there would be riots everywhere as the population was starving, while the Prime Minister had food at home. This, Mr. Speaker, I consider to be an all-time low from Honourable Mohammed. Perhaps I was a little too optimistic in believing that they would have the wisdom to rise above partisan politics over such a serious matter of national interest and look at the bills in a dispassionate and objective manner. And of course, come up with constructive and realistic counter-proposals. They still seem to be lost in the source of politicking. Instead of an honest and candid debate, we were served with the typical empty rhetoric of the frustrated demagogues and doomsayers, appealing on people's emotions and fear, rather than inspiring and motivating people towards national unity and solidarity in this time of crisis. Mr. Speaker, sir, there have been comments made to the effect that I did not meet or consult with members of the opposition in relation to the measures that we have been taking as a government. I fail to understand such remarks, as I have conferred with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition on several occasions, and he, I consider, to be the rightful representative of the parliamentary opposition in its entirety. Mr. Speaker, sir, members from this side of the House have already given convincing rebuttals to the arguments coming from the opposition side. And therefore, I will not like to repeat so many of them, but nevertheless, I would like to draw attention and to take a few points that have been raised, not by many members, but particularly the Leader of the Opposition. Because we need to set the record straight. The Leader of the Opposition stated that this government is fleecing the population. And that he went on to accuse us of ditching out public money in favor of the big earners of the private sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think it is a fact, and history will bear testimony to what has already been done in the past, that the Labour PMSD government were the ones who fleeced the population. So much so that they delivered absolute poverty in this country. Let me remind the Honourable Leader of the Opposition how in 2006-2007, the rupee was massively depreciated by 20%. And this impacted dramatically on commodity prices and inflation. The purchasing power of the population was depleted. And instead of redressing the situation through adequate salary compensation based on the rate of inflation, what they did, Mr. Speaker, sir, they came forward with what I call a gimmick called the National Pay Council to deprive workers and employees of their dues. And I don't want to dwell more on this, but suffice it to say, when I say it was a gimmick, there was no, first of all, there was no discussion at all. There was, and probably Honorable Mohammed would remember, a formula that was applied to divide inflation by 2. And that was done by an officer of the National Pay Council. This is the way of what we call tripartite, version of Labour PMSD. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, sir, they came up with anti-worker labour laws that gave employers the power to fire sans vergogne. The Minister of Labour explained in his speech how the rights of workers were squashed, be it in terms of the right to strike or in the admit of redundancy, and with regards to payments of overtime and shift work. And this came at a time when the country was not even facing any such crisis. Not a crisis that we are facing today. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mauritians have certainly not forgotten the repressive taxes that the Labour PMSD government introduced during their tenure. I'm here referring to the National Residential Property Tax, tax on interests, tax on cooperative societies, and so on. At the same time, they were proclaiming that there were no other alternative. You remember the famous TINA? There is no alternative. And I proved them wrong, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because thereafter, I reintroduced the tripartite mechanism to determine salary compensation based on the rate of inflation. As Minister of Finance during my various mandates, we have been paying yearly salary compensations well above the rate of inflation. I also abolished all the taxes that they had introduced. We amended the labor laws to redress the miseries that were caused to workers and employees and to establish their rights. We introduced the minimum wage to ensure that no full-time worker earns less than 9,000 rupees and now 10,200 rupees. We introduced the negative income tax allocation and subsistence allowance and so many other measures. We have increased the basic retirement pensions to 5,000 rupees. And now it has reached 9,400 rupees. And all these were intended to support our most vulnerable citizens. And now they are saying that we are anti-worker, we are anti those who are vulnerable. Let me refresh the memory of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition and refer him to a correspondence of the then Member of Parliament of the Labour Party, Nita Diapal Singh, who was also Vice Chairperson of the Commission pour la démocratisation de l'économie. She sent a letter to the Prime Minister, then Prime Minister. Let me quote what she said. Since this government, the Labour PMSD government, took office, it has been a one-way street towards the economic elite in terms of handouts, unquote. A member of their own party, can you imagine, writing to the